Welcome to another edition of TSA Safety Matters. I'm your host, Greg Kerr from Stakeholder Relations, and today we're with Shrikant Mangalam, who's the Director and Chief Advisor for TSA's Public Safety Risk Management Group, and Michael Roth, who's the Director of Legal Services for the Ontario Motor Vehicle Industry Council. So thanks for being with us today, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, this was a unique forum, one that you have titled The Future of Risk-Informed Resource Allocation. Maybe first off, what does that mean? How do you use risk to help in that respect?
First of all, as agencies with responsibilities of managing risks in the public interest, we have certain obligations to fulfill in administering the regulations that we have adopted. And there's in addition to that, there's an expectation from our stakeholders, including the public, that we protect them from any harms that may be caused as a result of the sectors that we regulate. And on the other side, we have this challenge of diminishing resources, whether it's the budgetary financial constraints that we have, the quality of people, aging population, etc. So we've got to come up with a smart way of allocating resources in a manner where we focus our efforts on where there requires to be a focus. And I think in that context, risk-based decision-making or risk-informed decision-making is a perfect platform for doing that.
Mm-hmm. I would echo what Shrikant says. From my perspective, a risk-based enforcement approach allows us to target our resources, which are ever increasingly scarce, both in terms of capital and manpower, where they're most effective and most needed. Not only does that allow for better regulation, allow for what is called in the industry right touch regulation, but also allows for better protection for the agency and for the general public.
Mm-hmm. So what was the genesis for this idea? How did you decide to develop this forum and who to invite? TSSA, as many of our stakeholders know, we've been engaged in conversations on risk-based decision-making with a variety of regulatory agencies at all levels, at the federal, provincial, and international levels. And at one of these interactions involving us and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, it just came up at that discussion saying, why don't we talk more often? Why don't regulators have this conversation more often? Because we seem to have the same challenges. We seem to have the same opportunities where we can collaborate and work with each other, particularly in the area of risk. And so the genesis of the idea started during one of those conversations with CFIA. And Michael and I have had these conversations as well in the last couple of years since I got in touch with Michael. And Michael jumped on the idea. And thanks to his support and his motivation in terms of making it happen, what started off as a good concept, in theory, ended up being a real workshop that we're going to be organizing. So, Michael, do you see this growing? Is this part of like big data? Do you see like this application of risk going beyond these four walls?
So this is sort of a nascent area. I think it's emergent. It's coming. It may very well be an outcome of the utilization, a more effective utilization of big data. Not that necessarily you need the one for the other. But it's increasingly being talked about amongst regulators in different spheres, both in the safety, the consumer, and the professional regulatory spheres. And increasingly, the TSSA, I think, is being looked at as a best practice and a high watermark in this area.
Excellent. So how do you think the forum has gone so far?
It's been great. It's the experience that I personally felt is beyond what I expected. Went out to both in terms of the numbers of people and the quality of discussion. It has been of the highest level that I could ever imagine, and the type of ideas that have been generated has been quite amazing. And the best part is I think people are on board. They have very similar thought processes. There may be unique aspects that every organization deals with this, but they see an opportunity to collaborate. In fact, I think there was unanimous
consensus in the room that there is no choice, but we have got to collaborate and partner as we move forward.
So this is not an area that I traditionally have a lot of experience in, which is partly what attracted me to further my discussions with Srikanth. I had worked on some projects for other regulators in terms of streamlining their enforcement process and investigation and inspection backlogs, and it occurred to me that a risk-based regulatory approach was the way to do that. It was gratifying to hear the conversation throughout the course of the conference, and I echo what Srikanth has said. There seems to be broad consensus. Of course, every situation and context and regulator has its unique aspects, but there is a lot of commonalities, and certainly an area enough that we can build and move forward on those.
Perfect. So let's get some feedback from some of the attendants. Yeah. Now, for an international perspective, we're with Minna Pavinen, who's the Chief Engineer for the Finnish Safety and Chemicals Agency, and Abraham van Poortvliet, who's from the BC Safety Authority. So thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
Now, Minna, risk is a very broad term, and it's applied in different aspects, but how does Finland do it?
Well, we are now trying to find new ways to implement risk thinking in many of our areas. And if I look at it from our organization's point of view, we have lots of areas that we are supervising, and now we are trying to find ways to implement risk-informed decision-making for all our fields, which vary from mining to explosives to chemical safety to consumer safety, electrical safety, and that sort of things. So
that's fantastic, and expanding. And do you have a lot of support through industry and government when you're implementing this?
Yeah, actually, we have a new government, and on their top agenda, they have the issue of lowering the regulatory burden. And so we get quite a lot of support from the government, and they are also supporting the idea of trying to find ways to implement risk-informed decision-making.
Excellent. So, Abraham, I don't think that's new to you from British Columbia's perspective, but how are you guys doing with your risk approach?
So we want technical systems to be safe, but we know that they are everywhere. So we have to set priorities, and that's why we use risk analysis and risk decision making, so we can focus on those sites where the highest risks are.
So this was a unique forum that had a lot of agencies, both from the regulatory side and the government side, together. What did you sort of glean from this, and was there anything that surprised you out of this forum?
Well, this really has been an exciting opportunity to be able to attend this meeting, and it has been really interesting to see that we have lots of common, we have lots of similar thinking that we are similar things that we are thinking about, and we are all thinking about how to develop the processes related to this sort of thinking, and what sort of metrics to use, how we are going to show that we are efficient in what we are doing. And so it has been really nice to see that we are very much working on the same things.
Excellent. Abraham, how about you?
As Minna indicated, lots of things in common. We all use resource allocation models, for example, and make efforts to validate that those models are indeed doing what they are supposed to be doing, helping us focus on the highest risk.
So what are you both looking forward to in sort of the next steps?
Yeah, there will be lots of steps to take, and there are still lots of things to think about, but we are looking forward that we will find new ways to find more efficient ways to improve safety. We already have quite a good situation, but of course there's always issues that can be done better.
And maybe it's part of getting a greater understanding. It is pretty much a common sense approach.
Yeah, that's
it's just
true.
getting people to buy into it.
Yeah, that's true. And when you have explained the basic idea, people actually know what you're talking about, then usually different parties find that it's sort of things what they are already doing, but it just needs some clarifications.
Abraham, what are you looking forward to?
I look forward to using all those fantastic results that we obtain in the analysis. I think many people are looking for better ways to integrate the analytical findings in the decision-making process. So I think that's the next step.
Excellent. We're with Dr. Fani Raj from the United States. So, Dr. Raj, we wanted to get your perspective on things.
Thank you. I'm with the U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Railroad Administration, and within that agency, I'm in the Hazardous Material Division, and we regulate the transportation of hazardous materials on rail. I enjoyed coming to this meeting because it's what I call the cross-pollination of the technicians, so that we can understand not only from the way we regulate with risk-based regulations, but also understand how they have worked in other industries such as food and municipal services and so on and so forth. So this has been a very useful meeting to come to.
So how does it work in your industry?
We have our regulations are still predominantly prescriptive based. However, there is a conscious effort to move towards risk-based regulations, or what are called the data-driven and performance-based regulations. It is slow-moving simply because there is always a question of how do we regulate on a risk basis, where people like inspectors who inspect are very used to prescriptive, where they can go and use a ruler to measure something and see if the regulation says it has to be that or what. Whereas here we are asking them to evaluate a performance. There is a kind of a problem with the timing. In a performance base, you measure performance over a period of time, whereas a prescriptive base, you just measure instantaneously. So there is a temporal element to this regulation.
So, and it's also getting policymakers to understand that as well.
Oh, that is, of course, a very important part of the whole thing, really. I mean, this is even though risk analysis has been there for, I would say more than 40 years and has been extensively used in nuclear industry, it has been used in space technology and so on, it is still to have that information in succinctly provided to a management so that they can understand and appreciate it is a challenge, and we're all working towards that.
And a little bit of a culture shift of moving to this preventative-based approach.
Oh, it indeed is, because the general public can only relate to what the incidents happen, what their effects are. But in a risk analysis, we look at not only the effects, but also the occurrence, how often they occur, and how do we prevent them from occurring at all, if possible, or reducing the frequency of their occurrences. And that's very hard to communicate that across to them. A very simple example is everybody drives a car, and we know that there's a lot of fatalities in the use of cars. And if you look at a risk basis, driving a car is probably one of the most risky avocations that every one of us takes. But still we do that because there is a perceived or definitely actual benefits to it too. So risk analysis by itself may not be enough, but it also has to be communicated in a way that the receptor feels that there is a benefit.
What it means to me, basically.
Exactly right.
So what are you looking forward to in the next step?
Well, one of the things that I will be recommending to TSSA is perhaps next time we have a meeting like this, where this time it's all regulators only, and therefore we're all technicians of the same trade, but we expand the audience to include the emergency responders, the general public, if you will, and to try to communicate what this risk analysis means and how this is going to improve their life and lessening the impact of any potential hazards.
Help get the word out there.
That's correct.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Dr. Raj.
Thank you very much.
So Shrikant, Michael, what are the next steps? What do you want to see come out of this?
I collectively agree that there are two next steps that were very obvious to us. One was the fact that there is an opportunity for this group to participate in the development of a national public risk guideline, which is happening as we speak. And there was, again, unanimous consensus within the group that they want to play a role, whether directly or indirectly, they would like to participate in the process, which I think goes back to some of the points we mentioned earlier about the need to have a commonality in areas where we think there is an opportunity for commonality. That was the first step. The second is that
they didn't want this workshop to be the beginning of the end. They wanted this to be the beginning of a process where we continuously have this conversation on a regular basis and even possibly have an annual event. So two takeaways for me and Michael. I can speak to are these two tangible next steps, and who knows where this is going to go.
Michael, what do you want to see?
I think this is an excellent forum, and again, I think the beginnings of a real movement and hopefully a groundswell in terms of the application of policy. As I said earlier, this is an area that is new to myself and a number of other lawyers and policymakers. Those are the forums that I typically am involved in. What I would like to see, and I think there's some appetite for, is the opportunities for some cross-pollination and bring the policymakers, the lawyers, together with those that are undertaking the risk analysis, and inform the way forward in a much more constructive and targeted manner.
And bring industry in too.
Oh, absolutely. They're absolutely part of the process.
Perfect. So here's to taking risk further and farther and moving more towards this preventative base of approach to safety.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay tuned for more TSSA Safety Matters.